This is Standing Watch. And now, Evangelist Norbert Link.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome back to our Standing Watch program. The war between America and Europe has begun. A very provocative statement. But I do believe that once you hear me and once I am done with this program, you will agree with me that the statement is very accurate. Now, I'm not talking about military confrontation at this time, which is also still going to happen, but I'm talking about the war of words, the war of other actions, and wars start with words, as we should all know. Let me begin with an article by The Guardian dated December 5. It says a new American strategy document titled National Security Strategy, with a signed introduction by Trump, says Europe is in economic decline, but its real problems are even deeper, including activities of the EU that undermine political liberty and sovereignty, migration policies that are transforming the continent, censorship of free speech, and suppression of political opposition, and loss of national identities. Now, Europe's reaction was forthcoming, was predictable. Deutsche Welle wrote on December 5 that German Foreign Minister Johann Wadepool said Berlin did not need external lectures on freedom of expression or the organization of democratic societies. Jürgen Hart, the foreign policy spokesman of Germany's ruling Conservative Alliance, was also critical of the US strategy. The assessment of the US president on Europe, it's very much single-colored, maybe due to information he got from the wrong sides, like right-wing radical parties in Europe, or sometimes it sounds like Russian President Vladimir Putin talking about Europe, he said. Then, of course, you have the European Commission strongly rejecting the accusations against the EU that the US strategy made. Now, let me just say I'm not here to take any position. I'm not saying, oh, this side is wrong, this side is right, this side is more right than that side, maybe they all are wrong. No, I'm just telling you the facts. I'm just telling you what's happening and the actions and the reactions. And then you make your own assessment, you draw your own conclusions. Bild Online wrote on December 8. The new US national security strategy is changing the world, and times will change even more rapidly for Europe and Germany than before. Experts are concerned and making dramatic predictions. A top foreign policy expert is now outlining the painful consequences for Germany. The new US foreign policy stance is a second turning point, Zeitenwende, said Norbert Röttgen, deputy chairman of the parliamentary group, the CDU-CSU. For the first time since the end of World War II, the US is no longer on the side of the Europeans, he said. That's a strong statement. No longer on the side of the Europeans. The Washington Post wrote on December 9, from the start of Trump's term, the president's inner circle has bashed Europe. European Council President Antonio Costa urged Europe to understand that post-war alliances have changed, and he's talking about World War II, and to get ready to protect ourselves not only against our adversaries, but also against the allies who challenge us. Ready to protect ourselves against the allies who challenge us. Former EU Commissioner Britton shared that the very shocking documents puts it in black and white that the White House sees European institutions as an enemy. It wants to destabilize. And then we have polling this year in Germany, in Europe, and that polling suggests growing alienation, the article says, with more and more Europeans viewing ties with America negatively or even as adversarial. Some criticized the EU and national leaders for not hitting back harder. The EU's former top diplomat, Joseph Borrell, on Tuesday called the US strategy a declaration of political war. A declaration of political war. Borrell called on European leaders to stop pretending that Trump is not our adversary, hiding behind a fearful and complacent silence, and instead assert the EU's sovereignty. Now, following this, we learned that the EU fined Elon Musk with a huge fine. Fox Business wrote on December 6. Elon Musk and Trump administration officials delivered blistering criticism of the European Union after its executive branch issued a $140 million fine against Musk's social media platform X. The EU should be abolished and sovereignty returned to individual countries so that governments can better represent their people, Musk wrote on X on Saturday. The European Commission said Friday it was fining X for non-compliance with transparency obligations under the Digital Services Act, adding that it was specifically holding X accountable for what the EU deems deceptive design of X blue checkmark, a lack of transparency of its advertising, and failure to provide access to public data for researchers. On Friday, in response to an X post from Senator Ted Cruz, calling the fine an abomination and saying that President Donald Trump should impose sanctions until this travesty is reversed, Musk replied, "The EU imposed this crazy fine not just on X, but also on me personally, which is even more insane. Therefore, it would seem appropriate to apply our response not just to the EU, but also to the individuals who took this action against me," he wrote. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said on X that the fine isn't just an attack on X, it is an attack on all American tech platforms and the American people by foreign governments. An attack against the American people by foreign governments. And then you have Deputy Secretary of State Christopher Landau. He posted the following on X. What's even worse is that the US is a military alliance with the very countries attacking us via the EU. As noted earlier this year, this contradiction cannot continue. The nations of Europe cannot look to the US for their own security. At the same time, they affirmatively undermine the security of the US itself through the unelected, undemocratic, and unrepresentative EU. This fine is just the tip of the iceberg. As I mentioned to every European leader I just met at the NATO ministerial meeting in Brussels, the EU support of the communist and anti-American regime in Cuba is another striking example of the EU affirmatively undermining US security, where the vast majority of its member states look to the US for their own security via NATO. The time for games is over, he said. Do you notice the tough language on both sides, showing that the quote-unquote friendship between America and Europe and Germany is declining fast? On December 8, Zero Hedge published the following article. Elon Musk is not taking the outrageous fine from Brussels and their bureaucrats lying down, lashing out at EU officialdom, taking on Nazi characteristics, and oppressing their own citizens' best interests. So many politicians in Europe are traitors to their own people, he said. The EU has virtually declared war on free speech, this article continues, and is targeting American companies. This is not a one-off slap. It's a culmination of years of threats and harassment. Further, Musk brings receipts showing the European Union sent him a formal letter demanding that he censor Donald Trump during the 2024 US presidential election. Now that undoubtedly made Trump very happy. The article continues. At the heart of all of this is the EU's obsession with controlling information flows. These moves expose the hypocrisy. The EU claims to champion democracy, but builds on Orwellian apparatus that monitors, scans, and punishes speech. It's not about safety, it's about power. This latest EU assault on X has infuriated US Vice President J.D. Vance, who yesterday took to X and posted, "The EU should be supporting free speech, not attacking American companies over garbage." German Defense Minister Boris Pistorius called Vance's opinions unacceptable, proving Vance's point about normalized authoritarianism. With Trump back in the White House and Vance as a key ally, expect pushback. America won't stand idly by as allies erode the very freedoms that define the West. The $140 million hit on X isn't just a fine, it's a declaration of war on uncensored dialogue. And then Donald Trump gave an interview to Politico, and they wrote on December 9, President Donald Trump denounced Europe as a decaying group of nations led by weak people in an interview with Politico, belittling the traditional US allies for failing to control migration and end the Russia-Ukraine war. The broadside attack against European political leadership is threatening a decisive rupture with countries like France and Germany that already have deeply strained relations with the Trump administration. By the way, also Chancellor Merz from Germany attacked the strategy paper. And so the article continues. In recent days, European capitals have shuddered with dismay at the release of Trump's new national security strategy, a highly provocative manifesto that casts the Trump administration in opposition to the mainstream European political establishment. In the interview, Trump amplified that worldview. And it's interesting what else he said in the interview. Let me just quote a few excerpts. If it keeps going the way it's going, he said, Europe will not be, in my opinion, many of those countries will not be viable countries any longer. The immigration policy is a disaster. What they're doing with immigration is a disaster. Europe, they're coming in from all parts of the world, not just the Middle East. They're coming in from the Congo. Tremendous numbers of people coming from the Congo. And even worse, they are coming from prisons of the Congo and many other countries. Now, when asked whether the United States and Europe will remain to be allies, he said this, "You know, it depends. They'll change their ideology, obviously, because the people coming in have a totally different ideology. But it's going to make them much weaker, and they will be much different. When they allow millions of people to pour into their countries, many of these people are committing tremendous crimes. I get reports that you will never see. And I think it's horrible what's happening to Europe. I think it's endangering Europe as we know it." Now, these comments are very telling because, as we know, by now they are thinking of putting about 30 countries or so on a list which would not allow people from those countries to enter the United States. And one of the reasons is security concern. Now, if the Trump administration looks at Europe as a security concern because they allow all these migrants in, then pretty soon maybe European countries will be put on that list as well. Can you imagine the possibility that Europeans are not allowed any longer to enter the United States? Many say, yeah, but this is far off, and Europe, Germany, they are in no position to challenge the United States militarily. You're right, not at this point. But God says it's going to happen. And God says it's going to happen so soon and so surprisingly quickly that people won't believe it, even if it were told them. We have prepared a free booklet, The Rise and Fall of Germany and Europe. And this booklet goes into the biblical scriptures telling you what is going to happen and how it's going to happen. And we see the beginnings of this development right now. So please ask for a free copy of this booklet. And thank you very much for listening. Until next time, this is Norbert Link for the Standing Watch program.
Standing Watch is a presentation by The Church of the Eternal God, P.O. Box 270519, San Diego, California 92198. More information is also available at our website, eternalgod.org.